Much for stopping by the Digital Creator Daily. If you are new here, I'm Rob from Hey Summit, and this is the daily-ish show where I get to have some awesome conversations with brilliant people doing interesting things. We talk about the creator mindset, staying authentic, assembling your toolkit, exploring platforms, and more. It's a pretty relaxed show about and for creators, thought leaders, and independent entrepreneurs. And just a reminder, regardless of how you're watching or listening to this, whether it's live or on the podcast later on, a conversation is best when it's shared. So however you are tuning in, feel free to jump in with your thoughts, questions, perspectives, and just thanks for spending a bit of time with us. So I'm really, really happy to welcome Neal Ludevig to the show. Neal is a producer, curator, environmentalist, artist, an entrepreneur focused on challenging dominant systems in today's world. Currently the CEO and founder of Moon 31. His work has been covered internationally by the New York Times, Rolling Stone, CBS, among others. He's helped launch Enlightened Snacks, a national CPG company that redefined the health food industry and the ice cream aisle, which I am quite envious of or would like to learn a little bit more about. I don't need any ice cream, though. Outside of Moon 31, he currently serves as the executive producer for the Revive Big Band's next album, led by Lauryn Hill's current musical director. He's a co-founder of Snarky Elephant Productions, a producer and writer for the miniseries Insomnia, and hosts FED Sessions, a dinner series where thought leaders and invitees, quote, make and break bread together. He was named an emerging leader by the Association of Performing Arts Presenters. Neal received a congressional proclamation for his work with the Harlem Arts Festival. There are just so many things about you that we can go into right here. But welcome, Neal. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
So I think anybody who's listening to all of that will probably get the sense that you do a lot of stuff and you're involved in a lot of stuff. And I know you kind of your root was obviously is this balance between, you know, art and artistic endeavors and business, and you went to business schools. But can I hear from you, like, how did that journey work and how did you get from where you were to here? How much time do you have?
I wish I could say that there was a plan that I thought of ahead of time, but there absolutely wasn't. I think the biggest thing that led me here was kind of trusting my gut a little bit and going with the flow. And I think, you know, seeing what felt right. You know, the short condensed version is I went to school, I didn't know what I wanted to do afterwards and had recommendations. Go to another country. So I literally moved to South Korea, did a backpacking stint around Western Europe, and came back here and got an internship at a position that an internship at a booking agency that sort of helped define like the next 10 years based off of who I met through that and what community I was living in. And even from that, you know, I had some friends, we put together a festival just by brainstorming. There's an empty space here, which I didn't know, I couldn't have told you about or knew anything about, or especially about the Harlem community and that kind of history 2 years prior. So it was completely, I think it was being in the right place at the right time and making opportunities from, you know, a lucky circumstance. And yeah, I mean, I think so a little bit of that, and absolutely just the people that I stayed in connection with. I mean, you mentioned the ice cream thing. I mean, that was because I stayed in touch with a friend from college who happened to decide he wanted to launch a healthy ice cream company, and we just stayed in touch and said, "Hey, I think you'd be a great person to build something with." And that's pretty much it.
I mean, so taking advantage of the opportunities that are in front of you, but also maybe not going with the flow, but as you were saying, kind of going with your gut in terms of what it is that you're thinking is absolutely great. But there are multiple different routes that you could have taken, right? Like, and I think that it's always interesting to me to learn about, you know, the road that you ended up choosing and maybe why you gravitated towards that route rather than others. So, like, for example, you interned at a booking agency. You could have started working in entertainment business, right? You could have been looking at working for like a large corporate and working your way up through that seemingly awful experience from what I've heard. But, you know, like, people are really, really, you know, jazzed about it, right? Like, but but it seemed like you were gravitated towards like these smaller scale things that you could maybe do. Is there something about you in terms of the way that you think that like you're more geared towards the entrepreneurial side of things rather than the let's work it within an existing system and grow through the ranks?
Well, I will say that I had an experience post college working. I mean, I was just trying to pay the bills, and I was bouncing like 3 jobs. I was working at Jazz Lincoln Center in front of house. I was working at a creative licensing organization, and I was working at a place called theladders.com. I don't even know if they still exist, but it was like 100. I was doing data entry.
Yeah.
But the experience of working in larger companies, even for the Ladders, I remember because I was bouncing between days, and they didn't even remember who I was. I mean, we'd sit next to each other, and that was the time when like Yahoo Messenger was a big thing, and at the time, I think I would turn to the person next to me and I'd say, "Hey, cool. Like, what are you doing?" They're like, "No. All communication has to be through Yahoo." And I was like, "What? Like, you're sitting right next to me." And then I remember I was saying, "Hey, I wasn't in one day, and I was messaging some people on the platform and saying like, hey, I wasn't able to come in. I was sick, and I've got some plans coming up. I'm going to be taking this scholarship, presidential scholarship thing in Korea. So, I'm going to have to leave starting this time." And they didn't even realize I wasn't in the office. It was just like they were so hooked in and into their screen that, and there were a lot of people there. There were a quickly growing startup that was like right after when businesses, a lot of people lost money and people were looking for jobs and stuff because of the recession and things. But yeah, I think the idea of working in a bigger company, and actually both my parents growing up, my mom worked at NBC, my dad, and then later both of them worked at AT&T. The idea of like being in the cubicle, like the Dilbert situation, which ironically, I love that cartoon. I think it just didn't really gravitate towards me. I like the idea on connection. It's, when I think about introvert, extrovert, some people say like how well you do in social situations. I tend to think it's much more of your recharge, and I recharge well with people. I just know that about myself. So the idea of being in a large space sort of gives me, the idea that there's a heavy amount of disconnect there, and it can somehow feel like an isolating thing. So being in a, to answer your question, the smaller entrepreneurial circumstances I think it's a way to answer the things and work on the projects that I want to do, and really closely with the people that I want to do it with.
So I think it's really interesting that you say that, because a lot of people could make a similar argument for the opposite reasons. You say it's actually quite isolating being in a large kind of organization, and you're able to create what you want and recharge with the people that you want to recharge with. Whereas a lot of people would say like starting a business is a very lonely thing. And actually it's very suitable to, if you are, working for yourself, you don't want to have to deal with other people. You can just be on your own. Great for introverts, like things like that. So I wonder why, or it also seems like pretty clear that a lot of things that you do they have community at the core of them. But they don't seem to, you don't seem to do anything unless it's connected to facilitating community connections. So I'd love to kind of understand why that is, but also like, do you find it, typically an entrepreneur will say, oh yeah, it's a really, really lonely experience. Do you find it lonely?
I think that's more of, I can only speak from my experience, but I think the myth of, the Steve Jobs, the Zuckerbergs, the Bezos, this kind of one person championing through lonely nights and things. I don't think every company that I've started or been involved with has been with other people. And maybe that's because that's just a very core value of mine, or that's sort of, I think I can't imagine. I think it would be a very lonely thing if the idea is doing it alone all the time, but I don't think anything gets done alone. I think that true statement, the truism, it takes a village, is 100% true. I kind of always, I think about this episode of Fresh Prince that, there's, he's like going to prom, and Uncle Phil gives him a bunch of money and says, here to pay your way through this. And somebody says, well, I guess you're Banks now. And he's like, what? And he's like, yeah, you just took the money. You didn't do anything yourself. And so he rips it up and he gets a night job. And then when Uncle Phil sees he's failing class, says, why are you failing class? And he says, well, I got another job. And he's like, well, clearly you're lying. And when they finally confront one another, he's saying, why did you take the job when I gave you this money? And he said, well, because I wanted to be like you. I wanted to be this self-made person. I want to do it all by myself. And he basically turns and says, you're a fool if you think anyone does things by themselves. People that give you those kinds of things and those opportunities do it because they love you. And returning that favor is using and maximizing the gift that they've just given you. And I'd like to integrate that idea that the people around me are the people that I'm doing this for and with. And, sure, there are times that you just have to hunker down and do some work, but, I'm trying to do the best job I can to surround myself with mentors and friends and people that can act in a lot of different capacities I can always lean on. And so maybe that's more of what you're alluding to, that there are times when you are working on stuff, you're seeking opportunities and funding, and only you are the person that can do it. But I think most of those times you've got people that you can lean to and talk to and always ask for guidance and advice. And, I think this is kind of a filter that will sometimes help you see if your intention is true. If you're in it for the money and you just want to keep all the money for yourself, and that's why you're not bringing anyone else in, then yeah, it'll be lonely and, probably not a very fun experience. But it's much better to think of the mindset, it's better to have a little bit of a lot than a lot of nothing.
I think that's a really, really great point. And you also touched on a bunch of different things, like, starting it with other people, but also realizing that you are the product of the people that you rely on in general. How did you, maybe now it's might not be as big an issue, but like, how did you go about finding those mentors, finding that initial community? Was it always, now you see 20 things that you're doing at the moment, it seems like, well, okay, you have your network, you're talking with people, you probably will meet someone and then think of something cool that you can do with them. But when you were just starting out, how did you break into that idea of, hey, I have these people that I can go to for advice, or I have this idea, let me workshop it with someone else? How did you build that you community first?
Well, there's actually two things that you're making me think of. The first is I can definitely identify with that notion of how did you develop these this network and connect with these people. There was a point of, probably 5 years ago, I was like, oh man, I wish I just had that badass mentor that's just giving you opportunities and saying, oh, cool, like I'm going to connect you with this multimillionaire or super famous person or whatever it is. And it just really started making me reflect and think, because that was actually around the time that I kind of reset from Harlem Arts Festival and was working on Moon 31. And I had to think back when I started Harlem Arts Festival and wasn't really thinking so hard about establishing these kinds of mentors. I remember we put together this project. It was me and two co-founders, JJ Alfar and Chelsea Goding. And we initially said, we're going to build this festival and we're going to program it, because my background's in music, Chelsea's was in dance, and JJ's was in theater. And we went to an organization for support and said, hey, we're going to do this thing. We need this thing from you. And they basically said, who are you guys? Why on earth do you have the right to program this?
Yeah.
And we don't know who you are, and you're asking us for stuff already. So why don't you go back? You can reframe this whole thing, figure it out so that it's not so self-centered. And you can try for another round. But in the meantime, why don't you come to some of our meetings? This was the local parks organizations, the MMPCIA. and and why don't you come to some of our meetings and see what we're about and get more involved. And I think that was one of the things, truth be told, that I really loved about Harlem. Sometimes it can seem it felt a little bit rough around the edges, but there was this, that old guard that is very tightly guarding its legacy, and its history and its culture. There's a lot of those folks that are very, I think they look at some newcomers and, or a lot of newcomers and say, like, how can we teach you, and how can we take you under our wing? And especially for us, which we had, I think, the lucky aspect of just being younger people, and they say, hey, like, okay, cool, we'll give them a little bit of tough love here. But what it seriously taught is the idea of getting a mentor and getting an advisor. The biggest part is not asking, what can you do for me, but what can I do for you? And it's a fundamentally different approach that, quite honestly, has garnered some of the best things that I'm dealing with, the opportunities that I have now. Even I'm literally going to be on a film shoot in August, which the entire opportunity came from me saying, hey, how can I help you? And I think when I reflected, when I was starting at Moon 31 and after doing some traveling, that, and thinking, okay, what's my next thing that I want to do? Reversing that question and that ask to everyone around me, is what, is really how I developed my network. It's how I learned the most things. It's how I got a base of supporters, and quite honestly, some of my closest friends who did that to me, who now I give more to them than they probably give to me. Or maybe, like, the point is, who's counting? I wrote about this a little bit. There's a great book that I always refer to called Give and Take that talks about the idea of being a giver and a taker.
I was literally going to say, let's talk Adam Grant for a bit.
Yeah, I love it.
Nice.
Yeah, but so that's kind of the crux of it. I think Harlem Arts Festival, and we're doing the same thing at Snarky Elephant now. We put together a board of advisors, both artistically and sort of, community leaders and business leaders in the sectors for Harlem Arts Festival. And for Snarky Elephant, we're doing the same thing. People that can really ensure that we're staying on track, staying true to our mission, that we're authentic to what we want to do. And, I think it's really important. And this is also a little bit of a salesman thing, is to always frame every ask that you're doing of what you are doing for the other person. And the best piece of advice I can say is be authentic in that. If you come in with the mentality of, I'm doing this just so that you can support me, those people are going to read through you. They get asked that stuff all the time. And another thing that I wrote about, and who I think did some, I'm not sure if he still does it, but John Levy, he runs this thing called the Influencers Dinner that I talk quite a bit about, that he gets some incredible people, like everyone from Questlove to the vice president to CEOs from Gucci and this and that, like, to come to these dinners and talk actually everything that's not about their work. And when he was asked, how does he get these people to come? He leans on that exact thing. He says, well, I just put the offer out, and I'm not asking for them. I'm telling, hey, you get a free dinner with some great people. And, I'm being very genuine, and I'm kind of giving unconditionally. And I think if you do that, people are always attracted to people giving out free stuff. I always equate it to giving free pie out, right? If I'm giving out free pie, some people are just going to run over and say, like, oh, sweet, free pie, and start stuffing their faces. There's always going to be folks saying, wait, what's the deal here? Why are you doing this? Is there a way, wait, maybe I can help you make the pie. Or I've got some other cookies. Let's make a dessert platter. But those people that are in those fantastic positions and those mentors, as you're talking about, are the people that have mastered the art of discerning who are the people in it for the free pie and who are the people that want to bake with you. It's a little bit also why, I do Fed sessions, that idea of making and breaking bread together. I love that idea because, yeah, those are the people that I believe that you have long-lasting relationships with.
So, I mean, like, it's key that, you're at least the way that you've come up through all the different things that you're doing and the way that you're speaking, there's a certain amount of resilience that one needs to have in order to not only feel capable of going out and doing that, but also just being able to weather challenges and things that maybe not don't go right. And I guess guess my question is about rooted in the idea of people and community. You're an entrepreneur. You're also in the kind of wider arts community. Two areas that are requiring a hell of a lot of resilience, and then add to that the idea of just you having this need to build things with other people. It sounds super exhausting, right? But do you find, like, resilience, they say, is like it's like a muscle, right? How do you practice that muscle to make sure that you are taking care of yourself and being able to see progress being made when maybe you're just in the muck at some point? Like, are there certain things that you do, or is there a certain way that you look at that?
Yeah, I'd even say those things have changed over time, but there was definitely, I actually worked with a coach who was and is a mentor of mine, that we took some time to say, like, what are your values based on, and what are your recharges? In addition to being around people, mine is being out in nature and traveling. And there was actually a point in time when I was really kind of, but putting the pedal to the metal, and kind of going full steam. I was doing Harlem Arts Festival pretty much full time, and I was Enlightened, and I was working at Enlightened like 9 to 9, plus weekends, usually waking up at 4, and then I was doing Harlem Arts Festival when I would get home until like 2 or 3 in the morning, and it's just like rinse, recycle, repeat. And that was a stint of time that I think for like the 2 or 3 years, I almost didn't travel at all, because I was just working so much. And I completely got depressed, and I was so bummed out. I like physically got less healthy. And yeah, it was, I think every time I reflect on that, I think like, wow, like there was like dark periods. Now there was some areas within that felt rejuvenating, right? Being around art, being around music and things. But one of the reasons that I shifted from Enlightened and basically did Harlem Arts Festival full time was because I love eating ice cream. I think it's great, and I think I love the mission. And I think what my partner at the time, and he's a good friend, Mike Shoretz, is doing is super important. Having access and making kind of redefine the ice cream aisle in the way that he or we did. It's super important to have healthy food. I mean, I've been to enough places to know that sometimes they just don't even, they're complete food deserts. But that was sort of my adopted baby, in a sense, as a startup. And we were putting the time and everything. But, I literally told him when I said, hey, if you've seen Good Will Hunting, I said, I got to go see About a Girl, or like, I got to go finish this thing with my baby, and see where it's going, because it was just building up track record. And I knew that I couldn't do justice to what the amount of work that position required, because now they're one of the biggest food companies in the country. So yeah, that work-life balance is really big. And I think before, there was a lot of external activities that I was doing. I was going to concerts, I was going to events, I was trying to, after that stint was done, every single year I made a promise to myself I would travel at least once nationally and at least once internationally. And now there's a few other things which have come on my doorstep from various places. I try to meditate, so I've done transcendental meditation. I did actually Vipassana a year and a half ago, which really grounded me in just taking some time and sitting and having a morning routine. And Vipassanas, if you're not familiar with it, it's those like 10-day silent retreats. There's no phones, there's no connection, there's no reading or writing or books. You're totally alone, but and you're actually surrounded. It's this exact thing. You're alone. You can't speak or look or acknowledge anyone, but you're surrounded by people. But it's about kind of addressing some of the things. And I think my biggest takeaway from that are actually two things. Is one, you have to make space for yourself to do those things. And every great founder does it. Every major CEO in the world probably blocks at least an hour a day just to think and just clear their mind and see what comes. Yeah, I think that's kind of the, at least, that's definitely a very, very big thing.
I think that's super important. Not just from the way that you're clearly it is a thing that you've learned, but I think it's also maybe cracking a little bit on that shell of everything being perfect. Oh, I'm doing this stuff and that stuff, and I have time. I only need to sleep for 4 hours a day, and every other moment I'm working. And
fool the body.
Exactly. But I think there's certainly this sense, especially when you're just starting out, and I say this a lot. So anybody who's listening to this probably like rolling their eyes right now. But like when you are just starting out, it is you are the thing that people are buying or selling or whatever. And because of that there's a lot of pressure that you feel on yourself, not just be successful, whatever that means, but also to not make people not like you. Because if I'm selling you some ice cream and you don't like the ice cream, oh well, you just don't like ice cream. But if I'm selling me and you don't like me, how am I ever going to recover, right? and so like there's a lot of pressure that we put on ourselves anyway in terms of how to grow into that role, and we kind of latch on to other people who are maybe talking up all the easy and all the fun parts of it, and not really kind of understanding the work that needs to be put in, not just on your business, but on yourself.
We're also totally a part of a generation, and I would say the millennial generations, but I would say, what is it, the X generation, and even more so, this idea of constantly appearing like we should be working and constantly being on. And I think part of that is, this definition of success that was put in the 90s and moving forward, that it's, working around the clock and the self-made entrepreneur, and like, especially when like the multi-billionaires and stuff started coming into play. But yeah, I think that's a false, that's a false impression. The idea of constantly being on, it's not healthy. And that's, it's not realistic. There's always a team, whether you're not, or whether you see it or not, there is. It's also, talking about the definition of success, and one that's often been portrayed as like, it needs to be the multi-billionaire or the one who's got like, bazillions of followers and stuff. It's making me think of a Chappelle thing where he's actually, I think he was talking to his dad about comedy, and he was and like being an actor and stuff. And at the time, maybe even about Chappelle's show, but he was saying that his dad was saying, you should know that the road to success is a hard one in this, and most people don't get it. And Chappelle responds by saying, well, but that depends on what your definition of success is. If I can do this and what I love, and I can make 40 grand a year and make a living and support my family, then I'm successful. Then I'm doing exactly what I want to do. And then I want to, that's my definition of success. And his dad says, well, maybe you're smarter than you look, or like, if that's like what you're thinking, and then you might actually do well in this after all. Because I think having expectations that are just a far cry away from what is needed and normal in life. I mean, I will say, having lived in, New York for 10 years, what people think is the necessary lifestyle to live, and what people put their money on. It's one thing I think that can be reframed a lot. And I think there's a lot of consumerism and media that contributes to that. But I try to spend money on my health and experiences, the things that, will make this feel better, and not, a Gucci shirt or whatever,
I think that's exactly right. I certainly see in a lot of people that they have this crave to be successful, but at the end of the day, they don't really understand what that means to themselves. And so they just think it's money. They think it's whatever latest thing they heard. Okay, it's the 6-figure club. I want to join the 6-figure club, or whatever it is. And I think that in some ways that the unquantifiable nature of whatever it is that they are saying is it's this weird boogeyman where you want it, but you actually don't know what it is. That means you want it even more. That means you think of it as this mystical beast that you'll get somehow. But someone will tell you, but then nobody will tell you. And so once you get that thing, you'll be like, it wasn't that thing in the first place. It was something else. And so I just kind of going back to something that you said earlier, like you were working with your coach and thinking about like, what are your values, and do you have a clear sense of what success looks like for you at the moment? Like, or are you constantly changing as well?
I think it's definitely shifted. Something that kind of came, I can definitely say it's not an amount of money.
Sure.
And I think there was, when I was, making me think about this, when I left Enlighten, I was sort of put to that choice of, I was a partner in the company. I did have some ownership, and the choice was, it's like knowing where the company was valued and where it was going, was, do I want to leave this company? And at that point, I was forced to sell my stake. I could easily look at a track and say, cool, like if I work here for 3 or 4 years, like my equity plus salary easily will be over $1 million. Does that do anything for me? Does it increase my happiness? How do I feel now? Does this look remotely attractive? And it was very clear to see that that was not the case. I think at this point, my success, I think a lot of it comes from, trying different things and seeing which of these experiences have made me feel the best. And so far, the stuff that's been the most rewarding, and, leaning back on what Give and Take is about, is the stuff that has impact, and being able to see people like positively get benefited from the stuff that I'm doing. And I think there's a selfish side that we all kind of have. And I can tell you right now, I'm really interested in exercising my creative voice. And, it's not the amount of money that makes a difference. It's, I'm interested in being put in a place and having an opportunity to take my voice and create something and give people an opportunity to look through my lens and see what I see. And hopefully in the process, come out having learned something they can take some kind of action on. Usually, there's a little trick in there where I'm saying, okay, I want you to see what I'm seeing in terms of sustainability, like see what I'm seeing in terms of social justice, like look at these causes, or LGBT advocacy. Like there's a few different things I really care about, and see, like, if I can make it. And we're talking about artists, and I'm working on a film right now that's specifically about a lot of the struggles and the challenges that artists are facing in terms of stability and a lack of support, and being in that lonely world, and especially being in a very toxic environment. And I've been on that road, literally on the road as a tour manager with these artists, and seeing what they're coming up against. And surprisingly, there's no story about that. And giving people there's the very glorified one that we see in the media, right? Get them to the Greek, almost famous, those kinds of things. But nothing that really, I think, hopefully leave someone walking away and think like, well, we need to change this. This is, I will say a little bit of a kudos, pandemic aside, like this is the first time a lot of artists, we're getting support as just as gig workers from the government, recognizing that these are essentially, every artist is an entrepreneur, and every artist is their own business, and they have to be their own best salesman, and they deserve support just like every other business owner. So yeah, I would say, I would say those are some pretty important factors to kind of consider.
I think that so clearly, though, that I think a lot of the stuff, at least for you, is tied to your passion and your interest for the subject matter, which is clearly starting things that are impactful, whether it's towards an issue or towards a specific group of people and empowering them. I guess and it's clear that like that is you, that's you being your authentic self. More of a practical question that I guess is, there are kind of two ways of doing what you love. There's doing it as a hobby, and there's doing it and the reason why you love it so much is because it really empowers you. But for some people, the moment that becomes their career, they are miserable. That person who's like, I'm thinking of a person like, maybe they're working at a company and they think, oh, I might want to stop working and become a coach or become a consultant because I keep talking to these people about this and it really jazzes me up. And the moment they do it, then it's like, oh, okay, how do I pay the bills with this? I'm not earning a salary. And, for some people, they really do like that separation. Whereas for others, they don't. They seem to just get high on it all the time. Like that's really it. And so I guess for you, and especially with you in terms of what you do, you're also building things communally. So it probably is never how you thought it was going to be, at the end of the day. And I guess is that not exhausting as well? But also, how do you separate the work and the life mode? Or maybe they're the same thing, but like, how do you approach that?
I'll say that in the beginning, there was less of a separation. And it was when I was talking about doing all those different things. I think I emerged from times at Harlem Arts Festival and times, at times working at that booking agency. And yeah, a lot of my connections were professional connections because you sort of never turn the clock off. You're working, you're booking, you're managing, you're reaching out to different people, and then you go out at night, and the concerts that you go, those are all coworkers and colleagues. I'll say that I definitely left that experience and those experiences reflecting on who are my real friends in the circumstance, because I didn't really have that divide. And I've been taking a much closer look at what friendship is and who are the people that I'm surrounding myself with and how I'm spending my time, probably in the last like 4 to 5 years. And for, I think I would say the other book that I constantly refer to is Think and Grow Rich. And they talk about this idea of a mastermind alliance and making sure that the people that you surround yourself with are balancing your sets of skills, but that you are giving to them more than they give to you and seeing how they show up. And I think combined with that give and take book, it's a nice balance, because give and take talks about, if you're a giver, what it's like as a giver when you meet a taker, and how to know when not to succumb to the doormat effect, as he calls it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there can be an exhausting thing, but I've been doing a much better job of knowing when to switch off and, relying on some friends and thinking, and kind of defining what are the important things for a relationship for me. I mean, there's a book which many people talk about, like, I forget, it's called The 5 Love Languages, or maybe
love languages. Yep.
Understand, like, what is my love language? Like, how do like the people that are important to me and that I care, are they giving me the kinds of support and care that I know that I need, and when I express that to them, do they feel like they're receiving it? And is there some kind of actual reciprocal relationship there? I think that's a really important thing to consider again, when coming down to the recharge and having that separation. I've been somebody also clued me into a really cool notion about defining relationships that has helped me start thinking about who are the kinds of people that I want in my life. And they said relationships, and this can be romantic or otherwise, often many people see relationships as A to B. I'm me, you are you, and this is how we interact, and how our needs and stuff, are totally independent within one another. But this concept actually mentions that there's actually a part C, and that C is the actual relationship itself. It's defining this context as either growth oriented, happiness oriented, or stability oriented, and thinking, are your relation, like, which one of these is your relationships predicated on? And I know, for instance, the relationships that I find value in and that I believe are authentic are the ones that are growth oriented, because that's someone who's willing to challenge me and sees, Randy Pausch talks about this in his TED Talk, where he says, like, the people that love you the most are the ones that rag on you and harp on you because they believe that you have the potential to be better, and they're willing to take the time to see you go through that. So I look for growth-oriented relationships, but other people don't get recharged by that, or they find that more frustrating, and they need someone to provide stability and security and support their problems with money, or emotional support. Hey, you're doing a good job, or cool, like, here's the tools to which to do this. But yeah, I would say those keeping that in mind, it's been a very good guide for how I create the relationships, and maybe have a little bit more of a grounding in terms of where the work stops and where the life begins. The best and the most wonderful saying is, if you love what you do, then you never work a day in your life. there's absolute truth to that. You just have to figure out. It takes time to figure that balance out, but I wouldn't stray away from doing what you love. From what you love, I would just, for fear of losing that passion, I would just lean on the people around you to give you clues as to when maybe you've crossed that threshold to doing too much or at an unhealthy level or not doing it right. And I even try to, I did this kind of experiment in the last year or two where I'm just reaching out to close friends and saying, hey, what's something that you know about me that I can change? Is it like, you know me well, what kind of feedback? Just give me some critical guidance and feedback. And I got some great stuff. And it's because I really trust those people and I'm willing to be vulnerable with them. So,
and going back to something you said earlier, knowing that your goals might change or your definition of success might change or what it is that you're wanting to focus on might change. And sometimes we consider ourselves hypocrites when we're actually just human and we're just moving. We're always moving. This has been amazing. Before we finish off, I think I'd love to hear just what are you most excited about in the next little while in terms of projects that you're working on?
Sure.
What are the things that I mean, we've talked around this idea of like artist plus entrepreneurship, but what are the things happening that you're particularly psyched about?
Sure. So I mentioned at one point Snarky Elephant. Snarky Elephant's a new production company that I'm working with 3 other co-founders that, in the same, it's actually kind of like the film and TV version of Harlem Arts Festival, where we're really interested in supporting and championing emerging creators that are underrepresented in media, that they are telling their stories, they're writing and performing or directing, but they are the biggest advocates for their work. And myself included, I'm one of those creators, which is a little bit how I was like, wow, this is something that I would like, and here's an opportunity to create it and both funnel my own work here and support other people's. So, and that manifested from starting, we produced a mini series called Insomnia, which think high maintenance and Fleabag in Atlanta with a splash of Insecure. But that did really, we put our heads together, and Vishal Reddy, who's a super genius, incredible creative, he put that project together. It's about a bisexual South Asian writer that lives in New York City and supports his sick aunt by moonlighting as an escort, and he also has insomnia. So it really kind of packages what we talk about, race and sexuality and identity. So we're working on a whole bunch of new projects. We've got about 20 in development, and we've just started creating this creator advisory board that's going to be in the same way, making sure that we're staying authentic to our mission, and that people coming from underrepresented backgrounds are actually the people choosing our next pool of creators. And they're the ones that can talk about their experience and relate it and hopefully act as mentors. We've got some incredible folks aligned to that. We're working on one of the projects, Rangoli, is an incredible feature project that is talking about the drag experience, and especially with South Asian, South Asian family dynamics. And so it's talking a lot there. But yeah, so Snarky Elephant, I think I enjoy building things. So kind of, building the community and getting a bunch of people together so we can start brainstorming and thinking, what are the things we want and how can we set an example? I think, especially for Hollywood, where you look at the diversity statistics, not just on stage, but, and on screen, but off screen, right? It's above the line and below the line. That's where we're trying to really set an example of that. Our production, 75%, we've already done statistics and measurements that 75% of the people that are off camera are a person of color, a woman, or someone that identifies as LGBTQ+. That's really important, especially when we're making content about all of those communities. And we want to make sure that every production continues to embody that. So I'm really excited about Snarky Elephant, just in terms of what we have. We actually just got a Sundance honor. We got to the finals for a big Sundance grant. And we're actually in the finals for another grant, and we've got some great funding opportunities coming our way, and humoring some investors. And on that side, I think you mentioned the Revive Big Band. That's a really exciting project as well. Igmar is a genius, and that is going to redefine what the big band sounds like. I'm a saxophone player and a product of loving the big band. So seeing what he's done to kind of change that narrative or change that genre is a pretty big deal. And I think just that music, he's really reclaiming a Black musical narrative, which has often been reappropriated. So they've got, you can see already some announcements, and we did a Kickstarter earlier this year. Talib Kweli and Terrace Martin and Corey Henry and Dr. Lonnie Smith. I mean, the lineup is Gene Baylor, Radar Ellis. Like, the lineup is insane. So that's going to be really amazing when it comes out. And yeah, I would say like those are the biggest two. Moon 31 is sort of working hand in hand with Snarky Elephant to make sure some of these projects come to fruition. I mentioned that I'm doing a film in August, which is super exciting. It's already gotten some press before it's even done, before it's even been filmed. It's called Home Free, and it's actually about two guys that it's a true story that they were in college and they befriended a local homeless person. And if you kind of seen Hey Arnold, like the local legends like Stoop Kid and Monkey Man, like that was this guy called the Professor, that everyone thought he was this tenured professor that gave it all up and sold off all his material possessions to do this. But in reality, there's always more to the story. In the process of inviting this guy to their porch to avoid the rain, they befriend him, meet some of his other homeless friends, and unhoused in Austin. And, it becomes this awesome, cool, amazing, special thing until it's not, until it's like, how do we deal with the fact that we did not intend to have a bunch of homeless people living on our porch? We're a bunch of college kids. So you can see there's tension, there's comedy, and there's, it's an opportunity to talk about a serious issue which exists in Austin and in a lot of major other cities, especially now. And the soundtrack is actually being produced by Adrian from the Bad Pumas. They just won and there's all original artists right now. That it's a soundtrack that, from artists that were around in that time, which that's super cool. I'm not even at liberty to say who's involved, but they're taking some investment, and they're doing some more stuff too. But yeah, I'm excited about all this stuff. Awesome. I mean, that's kind of that gives you a little bit of a taste, though.
And I think anybody listening or anybody watching can also see that, like, there's sometimes we have to rattle off the things that we're doing, but there's just such energy in terms of what what it is that you're saying, and all of those things look incredibly interesting. And I'd like to follow along for quite a few of them. But I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I wanted to thank you so much, Neal, for taking some time to chat today. I thought it was great. If anybody out there would like to learn a little bit more about Moon 31 and connect with Neal, you can find him on Twitter and on Instagram at Mr. Nealio, MisterNealio, or you can visit and sign up to his newsletter at www.nealludevig.com or www.moon31, MOON31.com. Thanks again, Neal, for taking the time.
Thanks so much. Utter pleasure.